today. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us for the Global Perspective series in this event that is part of the Futures model. So module, thinking about imagining our futures and our lives post-graduation, post-pandemic, and how, where do we go from here? And so this panel is with a group of Tulane alumni students who, as international students, have navigated the post-college life and transitioned into a job in the United States post-graduation. And so what we're going to do today is give each one of the panelists an opportunity to talk a little bit about their experiences and share a little bit of their advice, and empathize a bit with the process of what it's like to seek a job post-graduation, and then open this up for discussion. So you all have the ability to type questions into the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat for any questions that you may have that you'd like to direct to our panelists. My name is Annie Gibson. I am the Director of Study Abroad at the Center for Global Education. And we at the Center for Global Education, we are navigating this current reality of job hunting, for working with our students, both US students seeking jobs post-graduation as well as international students. It's a difficult moment for us all. I know that as you're going into looking for a new career, there are many things to think about navigating and in this moment, and also in terms of thinking about different cultural differences, different visa requirements that become important factors in your job hunting process. So hopefully with the advice of peers who've navigated some of this to begin with, it can give you a chance to think through some of those hurdles that you may face. And we also have representatives from Tulane's Career Center. We have Catherine Jurgen and Catherine Santanilla, who are here and can provide some insight into resume, cover letter writing, sort of how to position yourself on that front. So with that, I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one, and each panelist, feel free to take about 5 minutes to talk a little bit about your experience, any advice that you may have for us to start the discussion. So I'll start with Ishanya Narang. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience finding a job after graduation from Tulane?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. I'm Ishanya Narang. I graduated from Tulane in May 2020. I graduated a year early, but I did it in 3 years. I'm from India, and right now I'm working as a marketing specialist for Tutsuite and Grubber. They're both tech companies, and they work with restaurants and other industries, and it's basically, they develop kiosks for these companies. It's wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. But yeah, I majored in communication. Like I said, graduated in May 2020. COVID cut my semester short, didn't get a graduation, unfortunately, but we're here and we're doing well, so that's what's most important. After graduation, I had set my OPT start date for June 1st. Graduated on May 16, start date was June 1st. Did not have a job at the time, did not have any offers in hand. And I set my start date before COVID was even a thing. And I was very optimistic that I would get a job by June 1st, and then COVID happened, and then I wasn't so sure anymore because everything was changing. I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to stay in the country, let alone work, because there were so many immigration changes happening at the time. It was very nerve-wracking. But I just kept applying, kept pushing through. And then on May 28th, I got a call from this company that I'm at, and they offered me an internship. And I started as an intern on June 1st, so I didn't use any of my unemployment days on my OPT. I started on June 1st, and then 2 months later, they offered me a full-time position, and then I relocated to Boca Raton, Florida on August 1st.
Great, thank you. Ishania, can you give just a few tidbits of advice if you had to throw it out there to someone who's thinking about, who's about to go through this process? What's a few things of advice from your experience that you would share with the group?
The one advice that I do have is don't lose hope. I know it sounds very cliche, and when people used to tell me that, I used to be like, whatever. Yeah, sure. Easy for you to say that. But you know, like my entire career and my life in this country is at stake. So it's easy for you to say that, but it's harder to do. But that's my own very big advice is don't lose hope, and that you, as an international student, you have a lot more to offer in terms of your cultural background and the knowledge you have from your home country and assimilating here. So just don't lose hope.
Thank you. Sabira Abadi? Abadi or Abadai?
Ibadi.
Ibadi.
Yeah.
So please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sabira Ibadi. I am from Afghanistan originally. And at Tulane, I graduated in 2016 from Tulane School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, and I studied international health and development. So I currently work as a program manager at Ochsner Health System. So I work on a Medicaid program where I'm managing a statewide Medicaid program that focuses on quality improvement initiative. And I've started this job just recently, a few months ago. I'm pretty new to Ochsner, but before that, I worked as a program evaluator at Louisiana Public Health Institute, which is a nonprofit organization here in New Orleans. I worked with them for 4 years. It was, I think I need to talk about my experience of the start experience of finding a job, right? I think one thing that really helped me as an international student who I really didn't want to work, I didn't have planned to work locally here. I wanted to work internationally, but you know, plans changed, and I all of a sudden decided that I am going to find a job here. And then, as an international student, all of you know that our options are not too open, and we don't have too many options where you know, we can apply to all entities. We cannot do that, and you would have to go with where you are offered to, you know, apply with OPT, or you know, all of the limitations that there is. So one of the things that really helped me jumpstart with finding a job that I could apply to was getting my resumes and cover letters, you know, ready and be really prepared to apply if I find an opportunity. And I started with participating in the Tulane's mentorship opportunity that was offered for the public health graduate students. And it was, I think to me, it was a very helpful and useful opportunity that I participated in. And it kind of, you know, kept me on track of polishing my resume, getting it prepared, have a bio paragraph ready, and have my resumes and cover letters, and you know, kind of have my all of the things that were needed to prepare for a job application. That was all ready. And then when I had an opportunity, a limited number of opportunities to apply to, I was ready to apply. I think that was like the really start point, and it really helped me to find the job that I found. So as Ishania mentioned about OPT, I set up my OPT date the same way in June 1st, and started, you know, hoping that I would get a job by then. And I think I started my job July 1st. So it worked pretty well in terms of OPT. I know that it was a long time ago, but what stands out as a tip in my mind is the mentorship opportunity, and any opportunities that is offered to, you know, students during graduation, I think I would go for it. And especially as an international student, I think it was really helpful to me. Maybe other students wouldn't need that kind of help with resumes and cover letter, but I think that was needed for me, and it was helpful.
Wonderful. Catherine, since we brought up the importance of cover letters and mentorships, cover letters and resumes, I wonder if you would just give a few words of advice for international students who are putting together their internships before we go on to Alejandra.
Catherine, I'll start, but then I'll pass it to you too if you'd like. So Sabira mentioned she's in the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine as an alumna, and that's the school that I represent in Career Services. So if you are not a student in the School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, the other Catherine will give you some more information in a second, but truly the information about having a resume that is tailored to the types of positions you're looking for. So if you know you're generally applying to a lot of marketing positions like Ishanya was speaking to, or positions that are focusing on public health organizations and the work you've done in a specific area, meet with your career advisor early and often is my best advice to make sure that you are not rushing to get your resume reviewed and approved in Handshake when there's an application due the next day, because you want to feel prepared. And then with cover letters, once you get a few written, you'll start to feel more comfortable. So you'll feel prepared when you find that kind of dream opportunity that comes up. And then Sabira also mentioned a mentorship program that we do host in the School of Public Health. However, there are mentorship programs kind of in different pockets around the university that I would encourage you to get involved in, whatever level student, whatever year you are. It's a great way to just be connected with someone who is like-minded in some form or fashion and is offering their time to help you. So why not take advantage of it? It's kind of like today that you all showed up. These three women are offering their time and expertise and experiences. So you showed up to listen to it. So mentorship programs, 2 thumbs up. Catherine, do you have anything to add?
No, just a little bit, yeah. So NTC Career Services also works with students with resumes. And so that's just something, it's nice to have, like, you may have a couple versions that you end up putting out based on what kind of jobs you're applying for, or have a master one that you kind of pull through. But having all that together so that if you meet someone who's doing something that you're interested in and asked to see a version of your resume, just like Catherine was saying, that it's kind of ready to go is great. Or that you've even written, like, you know, if there's a job you're interested in and written a cover letter before, that process of writing it once and following like the business letter format version, you know, of doing that, kind of once you've done that once, it helps make it easier for in the future. So I kind of agree with all of that. We also, and I know Catherine's office does too, we meet with students one-on-one to like work through any of those, anything that comes up. So feel free to email or make appointments. And we have, right now we have 6 coaches that meet with students.
I can attest to that. I actually worked with you, Catherine. I don't know if you remember.
That's awesome.
I did work with you.
That's great. Thank you. So now I'd like to go to Alejandra Gonzalez Vargas. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience transitioning from Tulane to your current career position.
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you for having me here today. I'm Alejandra, you can call me Ale if you prefer. I graduated from Tulane also in May of 2020, so I was one of those COVID grads, no graduation. I actually left the US early, so in March I was back in Mexico City. This is my parents' house. That shadow behind me was my brother. He's very tall. And I've been here since March, and it has been very strange. And I think that experience was especially strange because, like Ishanya was saying, a lot of things were changing every day, and the advice that USCIS and other entities were issuing for international students was changing pretty constantly. Something that I ended up actually doing was paying a small, actually quite small fee for an immigration attorney to advise me because I was very, very confused about a lot of things. I was on CPT at the time as a part-time intern associate type position. at the organization where I'm currently at. It's called Life Without Borders. It's a nonprofit. I am currently their operations and finance coordinator. At the time, I didn't know I would get a job offer. I had spoken about it with my supervisor before, but it's a nonprofit and they weren't sure what COVID meant for them and hiring, and they knew they wanted to hire a finance person. I didn't even want to be the finance person. I had always been on board to help with programs, but I was a management student and I had the necessary knowledge to be their finance person. And when they brought that up to me, I said, okay, sure. And it's turned out to be actually really fun. I actually really like my job. My boss has been talking about phasing me out of finance or bringing somebody else on. And I'm like, no, I like my job. I'll keep it. So I think my first COVID lesson was that I opened up my horizons a little bit and took on something that I just didn't know I was ready to take on and that I wanted to do. I now do a mix of finance and programs at the same time, and I really enjoy it. And to what Ishania was saying earlier, also about being an asset as an international student, you know, my native language, Spanish, has been extremely useful to me in this job. We run programs with communities that are often Hispanic, and we do have Spanish speaking team members, but having one more is always helpful. And I'm also trying to help the organization get a little presence in Mexico off the ground, which is a long-term goal that they'd had for ages. And having me on the team and actually living in Mexico City has been a strange asset during this time. It's unusual because OPT isn't usually something you do outside the US, right? But present regulations allow you to complete that. So if you're interested in completing your OPT while you're abroad, current regulations suggest you'll be able to do that. That's not to say those regulations will still be in place in a few months. There's no way to know. But right now, that's how I've been able to stay home because the office has been closed and will continue to be closed for a while. And this is the best compromise that we found because I mentioned that relocating to Washington, D.C. and living in a very expensive closet by myself or with strangers would probably not be the best for my mental health during a very difficult time. So that's also a conversation that you need to, I think, be ready for. Understanding what your boundaries are and how to best present those to a potential employer. And if you don't feel comfortable establishing boundaries, I think that's a moment to reassess your priorities and be sure that you're taking care of yourself. Because this is a hard time, and it's been, I think online schooling has been very difficult for people. I think online work has been very difficult for people. And you need to be really conscientious about what your next steps will be and how that will impact you as a person. So that's one piece of advice I have to give. The other one is what I mentioned about kind of broadening your horizons and seeing what you're interested in and kind of going beyond that. I've been looking for job opportunities along the lines of program assistant and program support and aid and that kind of thing. And, you know, I submitted my applications. I had the recommendation was I had a copy of my resume on Canva. That's another great tip. Canva.com has excellent templates. They'll help you stand out a little bit. I had a template for my cover letter on Canva. I just made a new copy every time I had to write a new one. I did write them a little from scratch. I don't recommend you having a boilerplate because it doesn't help you stand out. But yeah, I had that ready to go and I applied to jobs, and it was very frustrating because I wasn't getting responses and I felt like I was in a difficult position because all I kept thinking about was, oh my gosh, when along the interview process do I tell them I'm an international student, and how are they going to perceive that? It's especially interesting, right? At my current organization, they kind of had time to grow used to that idea. I had been an intern the previous summer, then they brought me on for a part-time position while I was at school, and then they hired me. And the way that that went down was interesting because they knew I was an international student from the start. And they knew that figuring out how to pay me and where do my taxes go? And now that I'm abroad, what does that mean? And how do we process my OPT? And there was all these questions and they had no idea how to do that. They had never hired a foreigner before. And I think that you'll bump into that a lot with small organizations like that. So if you're interested in going into the nonprofit sector or into small companies or even the startup sector, I think you'll find that these are people that are very willing to help you, but are entirely unprepared to do so. And you have to be ready to take that on. Like I said, I found an immigration attorney to advise me. I had bookmarks of all the USCIS websites with all the current regulations and things, right? I think you need to be ready to take on that role and recognize that if you're not going into a big organization that has a dedicated HR staff that knows this stuff, you will probably become the person that knows this stuff. Being able to offer that the moment that that conversation comes up, which the advice I received was, you should probably talk about this when you're in a second round interview, or when you get an offer, if it hasn't come up by then, for sure. But when you have this conversation, it helps if you come across as, I know what I'm doing. I understand that you might not be familiar with these processes, but I know how it works. OPT is a great advantage. It's so simple. Employers hardly have to do anything, but just the notion of these processes freaks them out. So it's really helpful when you can come forward and say, this is a list of all you have to do. It's super simple. I had to renew my F1 visa recently, and I told my employer, this is all you have to do. That's it. And they were like, okay, we trust you. Building that trust, I think, is really important. So the last piece I have to share, I think, is about relationship building and making sure that if you can make the most advantage of these mentorship programs. I participated in several while I was at Tulane, or any other forms of networking. Make sure that you try to find people who trust you and know what you're capable of, so that they can vouch for you when the time comes and say, no, this person is competent. They know what they're doing. You won't have any issues. And in that sense, I actually do have to speak for the nonprofit sector, the startups, those little organizations that have very little understanding or even capacity, but they often have a lot of willingness to help you out, as has been my experience. And I think it's often overlooked by international students that are trying to find that one big organization that will have all the support system readily in place. If you're willing to commit that extra effort of creating your own support systems, I think you get a big welcome sometimes, because people are ready and interested to help you out if they feel like you can lead the way.
Thank you so much, Alejandra. I think in particular, talking about how as students, you have come to navigate, both you had to navigate COVID, right? And working in a job in the US, but living in Mexico, and the different scenario that presents. And then also this question that often comes up, and that we hear in our work a lot of, when do you tell employers that you are an international student, and how much will you have to help your employer along as well through that process? Those are two such important things for this conversation. Before I open up to questions for the panelists, I'd love to hear from Ishania and Sabira in those 2 points, both anything related to COVID that has happened in particular, and anything in your employment situation that you had to sort of navigate differently as an international student.
Absolutely. Wait, Sabira, you go. Go ahead.
All right, go ahead. I don't have too much because no, I don't think of any specific thing that changed specifically for me at this point. I'm sure Ishania would have a lot.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So the first thing obviously that happened was I like to plan ahead. I'm a big planner. If I don't have a plan, I'm always anxious. Like even at work, my morning, I like come in 30 minutes early to work so I can set my goals for the day and know what I'm doing. That's how I function best. So when COVID hit, everything was upside down. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea what I was going to do. So that was very stressful for me. But the one thing that I kept doing was apply, right? I kept applying for all these roles. And I actually, COVID happened to be a good thing for me. It turned out to be a good thing. Because the company that I'm at now, they do an internship program each summer, but it's in person. But because of COVID, they started a remote internship program, which is why I was in New Orleans at the time. And that's why I was able to do this internship, because I couldn't have relocated just for an internship. I was able to do an internship with them just because it was remote. And it was a whole thing with 40 other interns. It was a whole program, and I was the only one they chose to relocate, which was very affirming, letting me know. And there were most of the students in this group were American students, American citizens. So when they picked me to relocate me and made a full-time offer to me, that kind of reaffirmed my beliefs in myself, and knowing that I I am a good candidate and I'm a good person for whatever role I want to take. Another thing that happened because of COVID was I actually got a job offer from New York to be a teacher, and that was something that I'd never thought of doing. I got that offer before I got an offer here. But because I was so confused I wasn't sure if I would get a job. Everything was in a flux. I was considering taking that job. But then I realized that I can't be a teacher because it involves talking to children. It's like shaping someone's life. And if that's something that I don't want to do, I really shouldn't take that job. And so I said no to that. I had to say no to that. And I said, I can't do this. I can't move all the way to New York and ruin mine and 30 other children's lives. So I had to say no to that offer. And that leads me to one other advice that I have is never do something that you don't want to do. Despite the circumstances, don't take a job offer for a position that you're not actually interested in is also a big advice that I have. But yeah, COVID it was great. Fun time.
Thank you. So now I'd like to open up the chat for questions. So feel free to just throw your questions in there that you may have for the panelists, and we'll get started with those. And again, it's the perspectives of these three panelists are really great because for those of you that are right now in this process, you can really see how this particular moment and COVID has created a whole new ballroom of questions and ways in which we're navigating job searching and internships and remote internships. So Sabira's experience in 2016, correct, Sabira? Was much different than those of you that are trying to navigate the current COVID situation. So just putting that as a reminder to all of you who may be feeling defeated, who may be going through a lot of uncertainties, who also may be seeing exciting new things come up, such as these, remote internship possibilities that might lead to something new. We are in a new world in that sense. The shifting OPT rules about, can you do these things remotely and even outside of US territory? So there are all of these questions and a lot of uncertainty around them that are complicated to navigate. And you can always reach out to the Center for Global Education, to the Office of International Students and Scholars for some initial guidance. You can reach out to immigration experts as well, as Alejandra explains it was so useful in her case. So again, keep the questions coming. The first question I see is there a place within the School of Medicine PhD program? I think this question is there a place where students who are studying in the PhD program, School of Medicine, can seek career advice? Do you know that, Catherine?
So I do know that there is an Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Studies, and that office kind of is the umbrella over all, graduate, doctoral, and postdoc students at Tulane. So I can put the link to their office. They do have one career advisor full-time. Her name is Brianna Mohan, who is doing virtual advising right now. Additionally, I would just say seek advice from staff and faculty that you interact with and see if they could maybe direct you to someone that might be really in tune with your particular research or clinical interests.
Great. Are there other questions in the chat? While we wait to see if another question comes up, I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about setting your OPT start date and how you went through that process. I know that can be confusing for students and can cause some emotion. So what advice do you have? How did you what was that process like, and if you could talk about that a little bit.
I can kick us off. My story is funny. I am a very cautious person, extremely cautious person. I think I can empathize a little bit with Ishania and her need for organization. And so I decided I wanted the latest date possible so I could have the most time possible to look for a job, because I didn't know what was going to happen after graduation. I thought there's a lot of uncertain variables, and I figured that my plan originally was I would stay in New Orleans through commencement, and then I would go home for a couple months and then a job hunt from home and spend some quality time with family and friends and so on. And that would give me some time to find a job. And as soon as I did, I would just say that I could start late July. And then I didn't really need that time anymore, right? Because I could just not. I was already at home. I didn't really need that. It turned out to be helpful anyways, because it gave me some extra time between graduation and my contract start date, so to speak, to figure out all the immigration craziness and whether it was okay for me to stay in Mexico through OPT or whether I had to move back to the US immediately and all of these things. And what I did in the meantime is that I was still working for my organization. My CPT ended and I had this gap between CPT ending and OPT starting. And that's when I consulted the immigration attorney and we concluded that I could work as a contractor. So I just kept working as a contractor. I reported my taxes to Mexican authorities. I still am. And then my contract started and I started recording my OPT, and that was it. And it was pretty straightforward. And it did change, right? My hours were a little different. My responsibilities were a little different. I didn't really assume a full-time role until after my OPT date started, which is the formal start date of my contract. But ultimately, once we figured out the logistical, legal part of it, it was actually easy enough to do. So I don't regret setting my OPT start date that late, because ultimately it gave me a little bit of buffer time to figure all that stuff out. And, you know, if students foresee that this stuff is going to keep happening, I'm thinking of December grads, it might be in your best interest to push out your OPT start date as much as you can, because it gives you a little extra time to think. And that was a benefit that I felt.
Ishania or Sabira, do you have any advice on that?
I can go. I set my start date for June 1st, which was 14 days after graduation. I decided I am also very cautious, but I guess my cautiousness came out in a different way than Ali's. I was nervous that if I got a job offer, my inability to start immediately would make them rescind the offer. That's what I was thinking. So I set my start date as June 1st, hope for the best. And then I was able to start on June 1st. I didn't end up using any of my unemployment days. But yeah, that was my thinking, that if I do get a job offer, that's what I was thinking. If I get a job offer, I don't want it to be rescinded just because I can't immediately start. And I also like being busy. I don't like just staying idle doing nothing. So I was like, I might as well set my start date for June 1st, because that pushed me to get something starting June 1st. So I guess it just depends on how you want to approach it. I think Ali's way of approaching it was pretty neat too. But I just needed to start on June 1st. I needed to do that. And so I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I had a similar, situation where I talked to the international student office a lot about it, and kind of got advice about how to do it and when to, start the application. I think I really also wanted to be able to start a job if I had the offer to start. And it also, I guess, the level of readiness for, your applications and how much of job searching you do as you're doing your last semester of education and how much networking you do, those kind of help you make a decision. And I had started my mentorship, program way early at the beginning of my last semester, and kind of had started networking and looking for some of the jobs. And that's also why I made the decision of starting my OPT date as early as possible, and didn't want to lose time and kind of force myself similarly to kind of look for jobs and work hard and kind of go after it.
Thank you. So we have a question in the chat. How do I start my job applying process? I don't know if I'm late. So how do you go about looking for jobs, basically? How do you start the process for looking for jobs? When should you start the process for looking for jobs? This student is particularly looking for marketing and management type positions. I'll open that up to anyone who wants to talk. Yeah.
That's okay. I can speak to that because I am in marketing. The one thing that I can say, it's never too early and it's never too late. Whenever you're able to start, as long as you're putting out strong applications, I don't think it should affect. If you start early, obviously you have a head start and you're able to apply, but also since I am now part of a lot of hiring decisions here, we need immediate start. So it's often like, yes, you can apply in advance, but sometimes we just need people who can start immediately. And I feel like the job positions that are out there are a mix of both. So you just have to find what works for you, and it's never too late. It's never too late.
I think I would echo that. I bumped into that. So I knew my graduation was just a May graduation. And so I knew that December grads were going to be looking for jobs in that fall semester. And so I did see a lot of job openings, but the advice I generally got was it's not worth your time right now to apply because you're thinking of December grads. And if you start looking at things and sending in applications in the fall semester, you're probably not going to have much success because those people are looking for people who start in late December or early January, and that's probably not going to be you. However, the advice that I would give is actually look for internships, especially right now that everything is remote. Flowers Upwarders hadn't done remote internships before. We are now, and after this, we're probably going to keep the remote internship program because we've actually really liked it. And I think that can be true for a lot of organizations. So if you could do an internship someplace that you like and where you feel you'd have a likelihood of being hired later just because you've seen them put out job offers before, or people in there and that they've experienced regular hiring, whatever that might be. If you could find an internship now and start building those relationships for later, that's ultimately what worked in my favor, right? Because I had an internship and then that part-time job and then I was hired. And that, I've heard that generally from a lot of people, that's really effective because people grow to trust you. So if, Diana, if you're graduating in May, right now might be a good opportunity for you to find a part-time internship for the spring semester or for now. You might be interested in, for example, the TRIP program, the Tulane Remote Internship Program. I know that one's been pretty successful. And I also know that there's the Freeman Career Center. They're pretty helpful. And they also know other people, especially in the alumni network, that often coordinate internship programs.
And especially, sorry to interrupt, but especially as an international student, I feel like what helps doing an internship is really helpful because then you're able to show your employer the advantages of having you on board as compared to someone who's a citizen, so they don't have to sponsor them or deal with any of the paperwork. So doing an internship is I definitely recommend that as well because that's what worked for me too. So yeah, doing an internship, and then you can show your employer your value, your worth, and then maybe they're more inclined to hire you.
From the career services perspective, so you're working with a large volume of students. Do you see, do you know anecdotally or in data, are most students finding jobs through internet, cold internet applications, or is it through internships and networks? What do you see anything on your end?
I mean, I think for us, what we've seen a lot of, we definitely see people who get jobs through like postings and going that route for sure. But especially with COVID, we see a lot using your networks a lot as beneficial. People are liking the idea of committing to people that they know, that they've worked with in the past, or they have some sort of connection with. But I think that's always the case. Like a lot of jobs are kind of those networking, or if you know people and have connections to them, like doing an internship somewhere, even if you don't end up working for that place, it opens you up to meeting more professionals and networking in other capacities as well. And so we usually advise that that's great. It's going to benefit you in the future if you can fit them in. The idea of so many more internships being remote right now opens up being able to have an internship maybe in a spring semester outside of New Orleans, whereas that wouldn't have necessarily been a possibility if you're still, in-house in New Orleans. So there are a lot of possibilities with that I've seen much more students kind of getting in contact to be able to network with more people. So I think I've seen a lot of that. And I think we were talking to students a lot about, this is the time to kind of use your networks. You want people who know you and have seen your worth and can vouch for you and pass on your information to other people as well.
Yeah, I completely echo Catherine's thoughts about, there's still going to be the job that you apply to online, and they just really think your resume and cover letter look great, right? But the networking piece is so important. And for the students listening who think that they don't have a network, or I don't know the right people, or I'm not connected with the right people, you as a student of Tulane are now connected with the greater Tulane alumni network. Like these three women below here, or anyone. I mean, we have such a vast global alumni network, and you automatically have something in common with them, right? You both have this shared experience. And so when you reach out with this very professional message on LinkedIn or an email, and explain that, I'm a Tulane student and I'm really interested in connecting with you, you have a little bit more reasoning there, or a way that you found them, they're going to be so flattered that you found them. They're going to automatically say, oh, we have something in common. Maybe they did a similar activity or an organization on campus as you are doing now. And ultimately they'll want to take the time. I would say, 90% of the time they will want to take the time to speak with you. So don't be discouraged if you feel like you don't know people in the city you're hoping to move to, or in New Orleans yet. You do have a network. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
I agree.
Briefly
But
to
sorry.
that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just brief thought. That network also includes your friends, especially upperclassmen. Even if right now they're doing internships themselves, right? If you're a sophomore and you're friends with a few juniors, if they can make introductions for you to people, the informational interview is a very helpful thing. I, for example, was able to help a friend intern with Iris Upwaters over the summer. An internship that she had lined up fell through at the beginning of the summer, and she told me that story. And I said, hey, we're actually recruiting for interns right now. Why don't you apply? And the thing here is, I think that sometimes there's a bit of stigma around saying, oh, I'm looking for work, or I'm looking for something, I can't find something, I need help. I think Tulane has a bit of a intense overachiever culture sometimes that drives people to feel like they have to do everything on their own. And I think turning to your friends and pointing that out actually opens up a lot of opportunities for you. I didn't know in the moment when I was speaking with my friend that we would be able to offer her an internship, but I pointed out that I knew this opportunity existed. And that's kind of the advantage you'd want to find with friends and people who you know are doing interesting things. So especially for those of you that are in sororities or fraternities, they often have those kinds of networking events with alumni or just with upperclassmen, and that's also very helpful. So, you don't have to look that far beyond Tulane's campus often to find really interesting things.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions in the chat from our attendees that you'd like to ask of our panelists? Well, with that, we'll start to wrap it up. I'll give just a second for our panelists to think if they have any closing remarks or advice for students that are thinking about searching for jobs in this particular moment as an international student seeking a job in the U.S. Again, from the Center for Global Education, I would encourage you to reach out to the Office of International Students and Scholars to help you through any questions that you might have about rules and regulations surrounding OPT at this time, to help you think about setting start dates for that, or thinking about sort of the bureaucratic process that might be particular to your case. Again, the internship experiences, the networking experiences, and then the particular career service offices that we have at Tulane that can look at your resume and your cover letter. And I think it is so important for us to remember that the resume and the cover letter are both cultural documents as well. And the way that you write a cover letter for a job in the United States is very different from the way that you write a cover letter in India or in Mexico. And so thinking about, the norms of what that look like, it can be helpful to speak to as many people as possible. It was also, I think, Shania who gave some great advice that there's some good templates out there that can help really help your resume shine. So Canva was the one that she mentioned. I'm sure that the career services may have other suggestions as well, and even templates that we can use. So I really encourage you to reach out to your networks of all sorts on Tulane's campuses and your friends, whether they be at Tulane or in other places. This is a unique moment for searching for jobs for everyone, and in particular for international students. It's a changing environment, and they're both positive things and more complicated things in that process. And I really appreciate all of the panelists sort of being open to discuss their particular situation. So I'm just going to let each of you say your goodbyes, and if you have any final words, that would be great. I'll start with career services. Catherine.
Yeah, well, I wanted to mention, we got one question that did ask just when you actually submitted your OPT application. So in your final goodbyes, if you don't mind including that, and then if you are willing to share your contact information with our attendees, if you don't mind dropping that in the chat or your LinkedIn. Last thing from me is just thank you for attending. I think as a student right now, the best thing you can do is attend the webinars that are going to lift you up and not give you more Zoom fatigue, ones that you can feel connected with others and feel like you are being supported, which is all we're trying to do here at Tulane. And like I said, consult your career advisor early and consult them often. So thank you. I'll pass it to Catherine.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing that I've been talking to students a lot with right now is try not to focus so much on that end goal of getting the job and focus on the process, because the process is the part that you can control. And just like Ishana was saying, like how much you apply for things, and that's the process. Your networking is the process that you can control. So focus more on the process of what you need to do and the steps you need to take, and less on that end result. And that kind of, I know that's hard to do, but if you kind of keep that in mind as you go through this process.
I'll pass it in the same order. Ishayan, do you have any final words for us?
Absolutely. I agree with everyone on, networking. It's very important. Even if you end up not getting a job out of the network, you will learn something of value. Every time you talk to someone who has more experience than you, you'll always leave with, at the very least, more knowledge. But on the other hand, if you don't have a network and you're just cold applying, that's not the worst thing. I did a lot of networking. I did everything I could, but COVID, just everything started falling through after COVID hit. And I got this internship from a cold application. I just sent in an application. I got the internship, and now I have this job. So if you just end up applying and that's all you can do, that's also fine. That is also perfectly fine. So that's my final advice, and I sent in my email in the chat. I also am available on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect and chat, I'd be happy to give my time. And also, our company is actually looking for remote interns at the moment. So, and our positions are in Handshake, if anyone wants to check them out. Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you. Sabira?
Yeah, I think my last word would be, we all know that the process of finding a job for an international student is way more complicated and has more, it needs a lot of patience than the normal job finding. So don't be discouraged or shy to just reach out to people over and over and tap into the resources that you have, even if you don't have, a lot of network outside, but just the resources that is available to you through the school, just use them and don't be shy to ask for help and use it. And as everybody else said, it may not, end up in landing a job for you, but you'll learn from it, and then it will be useful down the line throughout your career. And I'm still using it, and it may not be useful at the time, but you can always tap into the resources and networks that you make along the way. And I'm also really open to any questions, or we'll be happy to chat with you, and reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is in the chat as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ale?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think this was great. I'm so glad to be able to connect again with the Tulane community. About the OPT application submission question, I know there's like a 90-day window or something. So the point is there's a certain bracket of dates within which you can apply. I think I submitted mine the first week you were able to submit it. And that worked in my favor because a few short weeks after that, we shut down. And then it was difficult to submit one, right? Because if you can't submit that from outside the US. So that's something to have in mind. So I had luckily submitted it before I left. My last thought is about this flexibility component I had mentioned earlier. Be open to new possibilities and interesting things. Also attend all the meetings that OISS puts together for you. Learn everything you need to know about OPT or CPT if that's more relevant to you. I know, for example, right now, OPT can be counted if you're only working 20 hours a week instead of the usual 40. And you can count anything as OPT, or most anything, like even working solo as some kind of entrepreneur. I think something like that is allowed too. So if, like Ashanya is saying, you're not having the most success and you need to muster that patience and work through a few months of job hunting and networking and all of that, you can avoid losing your OPT status by finding something else to do, something small to keep you busy, to keep you in status until you find something that you actually want to hunker down to do, right? So be flexible about that. Open yourself to the possibilities. Ask all the questions. Ask people like us. I'm also happy to chat with you. Ask OISS, all your mentors at Tulane. You have a really great support network. So you have the best chances of success when you make the best use of it. I wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks again to all the panelists. I really appreciate you sharing your perspectives. And thank you to all the attendees who have joined us today to talk about this. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, in the panelists, or any of us here at the Center for Global Education. I hope you all have a wonderful day and stay safe. Great. See ya. Bye.
Bye.